Welcome to the Lit Mom Podcast, your go-to source for bite-sized literacy tips and tricks. Join me as we explore evidence-based strategies, techniques, and resources that promote strong reading and writing skill development. Get ready to empower your family with the knowledge and tools to navigate the world of structured literacy and unlock limitless potential. Welcome to the second episode of the Lit Mom Podcast. I'm your host, Dev, and today we will delve into an important topic that has an impact on your child's development. We are going to focus on oral language development today. We are going to dive into what the research is telling us about the significance of oral language. We are also going to give tips and tricks to allow for you to hopefully support your child at home in developing their oral language, which will in turn support their reading and writing journeys. Before we dive into today's episode, I would first like to take a moment to acknowledge the land in which we gather to produce this podcast. I reside on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, which includes the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, also known as the Three Fires Confederacy. I am grateful to be on the land of the Indigenous peoples who have cared for and nurtured this land for generations, and I would like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples who continue to care for and nurture this land that we live on. If you would like some more information to extend your learning on which traditional territory you reside on, which treaties cover the traditional territory in which you reside on, there's a really wonderful website that we all have access to, and it is www.native-land.ca. You can go on there, type in your address, and it'll give you all of this information for you to further your own education and extend your learning. So I encourage all of our listeners to check it out. Okay, Lit team, let's get into our second episode. We are going to be talking about oral language development. So I think it is worth noting that in the newly revised Ontario language curriculum, one of the overall expectations that we are going to be focusing on is going to be foundations of literacy. And within that, we talk about oral and nonverbal communication. This means that your kiddo is going to be learning and developing skills such as speaking clearly and coherently, active listening, taking turns, using proper words and vocabulary within their sentences. And are they able to use proper nonverbal cues and body language, not only when they are speaking to someone, but when they are listening to someone? So that is a very broad explanation of the curriculum, but it's worth noting that oral language is a key component across grades that is going to be a focus within the new curriculum document. Let's start off today by talking about the critical role that language has for children, specifically oral language development. Research consistently shows that children that have strong oral language development are more likely to succeed academically, socially, and emotionally. Having strong oral language abilities allows for children to express themselves, to understand what others are saying, and comprehend written language later on, which is key when we think about reading and writing. I would love for you to think back to when your child or children were born and how did you interact with them? Even though they could not speak, it is very likely that you immediately conversed with them to help them make sense of the world around them. You had conversations with them, you pointed out different objects and who different people were to them using simple words, and building on those conversations as they got older. From the very beginning, speech and oral language was a part of your child's life and what they were listening to make sense of the world around them and look to you to understand how things worked or how things didn't work. They also began to use communication through oral language and nonverbal gestures to help tell you what they needed or wanted, whether it started out with pointing and the cooing and babbling to single words, and then from there, simple sentences with 2 or 3 words, and so on and so forth. Again, showcasing how important oral language is when we think about how do humans communicate and share our thinking with one another. Recent research highlights the vital role of early language exposure. Studies have revealed that children that are exposed to rich language environments from birth, they tend to have developed bigger vocabularies and have better grammar and understanding of sentences and able to comprehend what people are saying to them, which is really key when we look at reading and writing. Vocabulary plays a big role, and a child's background knowledge is going to impact their understanding of what they are able to read or understand when someone is speaking to them. Vocabulary is another piece that we will focus on in future episodes because I think it is just too much to put into one 15-minute episode on oral language and vocabulary. Additionally, researchers emphasize the importance of back and forth conversations with children and adults and family members. Anyone in their life that they encounter is going to benefit from having those abilities to have conversations that are back and forth. We often think about in school how we need to have more collaboration and more conversations that are not one-sided, where you are telling them about something the whole time and they're not getting the opportunity to engage in conversations where they are listening and they are speaking and they are asking questions and you are asking questions. So having those conversations that go back and forth is such a key piece for children as they are developing their language and oral language skills. So with that in mind, I would like to introduce our first official guest to the Lit Mom podcast.
Hi, my name is Emerson.
So Em is my son, and so he is going to help out from time to time. You're basically like the co-host for the Lit Mom podcast, by the way, because you are joining Mommy to help out. So he is going to help me by giving examples of strategies that we use at home that you can use at home to help your kiddo with their literacy skill development, whether it's reading or writing. But today we are doing oral language. So something that we like to do at home is ask questions. And we try to ask questions that are open-ended so that there are many ways to answer it and there is not just one answer that we're looking for. So with that in mind, do you want me to ask the question first or would you like to ask your question first?
My question first.
Okay, I'm ready. I'm listening.
Would you rather
Mhm.
live in
It's okay, pause. And then re-ask.
would you rather be hot every day or half hot, half cold?
Okay, so would I rather be hot all day long or would I rather be hot half the day and then cold half the day? Is that right?
Mhm.
Okay. I think I would rather half and half because I don't know that I could be hot all day long. Then it's really warm. Okay. How would you answer your question?
I would be half like you.
You'd be the same as me, half hot, half cold. How come?
Because I can't take hot.
Okay. And do you like when it's cold?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. Are you ready for my question? Okay. So my question is, if you were to paint a mural, now you know what a mural means?
Yes.
Okay. If I were to put a mural on the side of a building and you could paint it, what would you put in your mural?
Baby Yoda,
Baby Yoda?
Pikachu, and a rainbow.
Okay. Now, if someone were to walk by and they saw this mural, how do you think it would make them feel?
Happy.
They might feel happy, especially if they like those characters.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, how would you feel if you were walking with mom and dad and we came to a building and had
Cool.
Pikachu? You think it'd be cool?
Cool.
Okay. What would you say to daddy if you saw it?
Do you like it?
That's a good question to ask. All right, mister. So that's it. You did your very first job on the podcast. You are free to go. Thank you. So there's a really quick example of how we can engage in conversations with our kiddos by asking them questions. I know sometimes at the end of the day, if you're sitting around having dinner and you ask, how was your day at school? We often get the answer of, it was fine, or I played and stuff is the classic here. So by asking questions that are still open-ended, but might have to do with topics that are of interest, or it's a really great way if you have done a read aloud recently and you're able to pull in vocabulary that you had read in the book and explain to your child. It's a really great way to use it, provide examples, and allow for them to then make meaning out of it because you're using it in your day-to-day language. And let's be honest, when we often read a book, if you think about our conversations that we have with one another, Our vocabulary is not going to be the same as how we read in books. So it's a really great way to build your child's vocabulary, which we know is very important when we're talking about building background knowledge or knowledge, which sets your child up for success when they are going into practicing for reading and also writing as well. Some other strategies or activities that you might be interested in trying out that are going to help your child develop their oral language skills are activities such as read alouds, where they're going to listen. You can ask them questions and see if they're understanding what you are reading to them. You can also ask what they think, or if they're going to be able to make predictions about what's going to happen next. They might have to make inferences and tell you what they think the author means or what is happening in the story based on what you have read to them so far. Again, I'm going to touch on wordless books at the end of this podcast, which I think are a really great tool to help build oral language for our littles. You can have them retell the story with their stuffies or act it out with you. They might sing or rhyme with you. Rhyming is a really great strategy to practice at home. And again, it has that oral language piece for building up towards phonological awareness, which is another skill we will touch on in later episodes. Also, a really fun one might be that you have them draw an imaginary map, that they're going to go on a journey and they have to draw a map that they're later going to then explain to you. And so the map might range in detail based on your child's age, but it gives them the opportunity that there's no right or wrong because it's based on their imagination, but they have to explain it to you by speaking to you. You might have questions that they have to answer about their map, but it gives them the opportunity to take ownership over their learning about what they might be doing and then share it with you, which I think is a really fun and engaging way to practice writing, drawing for fine motor, and getting in that oral language piece as well. One more strategy that I want to talk about is called validate and expand. So when your kiddo comes to you and they say something to you like, I founded a frog, instead of stopping and saying, you mean I found a frog, you're not going to stop and correct them. Instead, what you're going to do is validate their comment to you and expand on it to provide them with additional knowledge or information that they might then become more interested in the topic, or they might simply move on. But it might look like, wow, it looks like you found a leopard frog. So again, I am not pausing to correct the kiddo. I am validating what they have told me, and I'm expanding on it by giving them more information that they can then take and build their background knowledge with. My final tip or piece of advice today is to remember that our kiddos are little. They are young when they engage in play. Sometimes they are going to have the best conversations. So join them when they are playing. Engage in play, whether it's imaginary play, it's building with Legos, you're outside, but those are going to be really rich moments for them to develop lots of skills, as well as be having conversations with you and making those really important connections that we want for families to have with their children. As we get to the end of the episode, I want to share another free resource with you. This is, again, another website. The website is SpeechTX. It'll be noted in the notes for you as well. But it is a website that offers a range of activities that you can be doing at home with your child to help with language and oral language development through speaking and listening. So you don't have to have all of these activities memorized. If you just have it saved as a bookmark and you're looking for a quick activity that could take 10 to 15 minutes, you can go to this website, click on one of the activities, read the instructions, and then give it a try with your kiddo. So I think it's really helpful to have so that we don't have to memorize and have all of these things kind of stored for that moment when we need to. But you can go back and you can just quickly check, try a new one. If there's one that they love, then you do it over and over again. But it gives you some options for how do you support your child with oral language development through fun activities and games. The last thing that I would like to share with you today is a picture book recommendation. I also want to mention that it is really worthwhile checking out your public library if you are able to do so. Getting your child a library card and having access to all those wonderful books, whether they're fiction or nonfiction, to bring home to explore and share with you is always so exciting, and I highly recommend doing this if you're able to do so. And they're free. So what's better than having hundreds of books at your fingertips to explore and bring back and get more and more with no cost associated? The book that I'm going to share with you today is Chalk, and Chalk is by Bill Thomson. The reason I picked this book today is because it's actually a wordless book. And so knowing that we've talked about oral language today and that skill development, Chalk would allow for your child or any wordless book to have to really attend to the pictures, to give you a story, whether they're giving you the predictions, making inferences if you're telling them a story, or have them tell you a story based on the pictures and see what they're able to tell you. You can ask them questions, you can tell them what you're wondering about or what you think a picture might be telling you along the way in the story. but it's leaving it up to them to use their skills of speaking and listening to figure out what is being told in the story. So a really fun way to add oral language into the mix and not having you just read a book for them to listen and comprehend, but it opens doors for them to have control over what do they notice and see and how can they share that with you. To the Lit team, I want to say thank you for tuning in today. I hope that you enjoyed our second episode of the Lit Mom podcast and that you are taking away some valuable information, some tips and tricks, or activities that you are going to be able to use at home to support your child with their oral language development. Again, oral language is such a core component when we're talking about your child becoming a proficient reader or writer. So any opportunity that you are able to engage them in speaking, in listening and turn taking, or following your nonverbal gestures to figure out what is being said is a really great way to build up those skills that they're going to need for reading and writing. Next episode, we are going to talk about the alphabetic principle. What does this even mean? How can we support learning the alphabetic principle at home? And then move forward from there into phonological awareness and phonemic awareness in episode 4. So just to give you a little bit of a heads up on what's to come in our future episodes, I hope you will join me again every other Thursday for quick and easy tips and tricks to support literacy at home. Until then, continue to nurture those wonderful and smart little minds that you have in front of you, and I will see you for our next episode. Take care.